Dumerils boas are hands down one of the best boa species that you could possibly own. And in all honesty, they're probably one of the most underrated and underappreciated snakes that you could possibly own as well. This video is going to be all about Dumerils boas and how to take care of them. My name's Pierce LaValle, this is Pierce's Planet, stick around. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are doing amazing. Today with me I have Legolas, and Legolas is my male Dumerils boa, and in this video I wanted to give you guys kind of like a little care guide on how to take care of these wonderful snakes. Dumerils boas are a wonderful species of snake that really don't get the recognition they deserve. You know, when you think of boas, you think of boa constrictors, you think of New World boas, you think of the ones, you know, the red-tailed boas and the BI boas, boas like that. You don't really think of Dumerils boas. Dumerils boas are one of the few what you would call old world boas, which means they are not found in North or South America. These boas specifically are found on the island of Madagascar off of the coast of Africa. They are specifically found in the southern part, southwestern part of Madagascar. There's another species of boa that is very similar to the Dumerils boa that's found in Madagascar, and that is the Madagascar ground boa. Their patterning is very similar, but they are two separate species. Both the Dumerils boa and the Madagascar ground boas are what you would call ground boas, which means they spend most of their life on the ground. And that's different than a lot of the New World boas, such as red-tailed boas and BI boas, that are fairly arboreal and like to spend a lot of their time in the trees. These boas like to spend their time on the ground, hiding in all the leaf litter that's on the forest floor. The Dumerils boa really gets outshined by the red-tailed boa, and you see, and they aren't really that common in the pet trade. And I have no idea why, because these are just amazing snakes. So the first thing I want to talk about is their size. Now, females get a little bit larger than males, but on average these snakes like to stay around the range of, I'd say, about 3.5 feet to maybe on the larger end 7 feet, if that. There have been some females that have gotten up to 8 feet, even 9 feet, but those are fairly uncommon. Males like Legolas here will tend to stay in that 3 to 5 foot range, whereas females will probably stay in more of like the 5 to 7 foot range. Legolas here is about 1.5 years old, maybe close to 2 years old, and he's about 4 feet long. He's actually pretty large for a male of this age. I'll make sure that I put pictures of adults in the video so that you guys can see what they look like, because females do tend to get somewhat larger than the males. What makes Dumerils boas great is their size, and if you want a large looking snake that doesn't get just ridiculously large like a Burmese python or even some red-tailed boas, then a Dumerils boa is perfect for you because they stay a manageable size, but they're still big enough to where when you pull them out of your cage, you're still gonna impress your friends. Dumerils boas, in my opinion, probably have one of the most beautiful natural patternings out of almost any snake. I mean, just the pattern, the way their body looks, and they have like this like almost pinkish hue to them. I probably should have named Legolas Bandit because he has these like ski mask looking markings on his body, which are pretty cool. Not sure if they have any morphs. I don't think they do. And what we have from the reptile trade is what we get because we can't import animals from Madagascar. Dumerils boas are fairly long-lived snakes. Their age range could go from anywhere between 10 to 20 years old. Some could even live longer than that. So this is definitely a long-term snake that you would be investing in. It's not something that you're only gonna have for a short amount of time. This is going to be with you for a very long time. Even though Dumerils boas can get up to be a pretty good size, their enclosure requirements aren't entirely crazy. The minimum cage requirement for an adult would be about 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And like I said, that's the minimum cage requirement. Something like a 6 foot by 2 foot would probably be even better for an adult, especially if you have a larger female. Right now, I have Legolas in a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot vision cage. Baby Dumerils Boas, you know, you can get away with something even smaller. I started Legolas off in a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, so he's lived in this cage pretty much his entire life. Because Dumerils Boas are ground boas, you don't really need to worry too much about the height of their enclosure. So you just want to give them a lot more floor space and don't really worry about the height because they're not really going to utilize it too often. My recommendations for the type of enclosure you would want to use for a Dumerils Boa would probably be a PVC enclosure or something like a vision cage, something that will hold heat and hold humidity well. Just remember that you could really never go wrong with getting a bigger enclosure. Even if your snake seems kind of small in that enclosure, bigger is better. The substrate that you put into your enclosure is important. Because these guys are ground boas, they like to burrow themselves beneath their substrate. Myself personally, I use the Freedom Breeder Cocoa Blocks, and I think it works perfectly, and Legolas loves to bury himself underneath his substrate and kind of hide. If you have a deep substrate, then you don't really have to worry too much about the hides you put in there, although I'd still recommend you putting in hides. At least 2 hides, just so they have that kind of extra covering. But for the most part, these guys are going to like to just spend most of their time underneath their substrate. Almost like a blood python. Like, think of a blood python that's a little bit more active, and that's a Dumerils boa. These boas do move around a little bit more than blood pythons, but they will spend most of their time underneath their substrate hiding, and then come out at night and kind of explore their enclosure for a little bit and then go right back underneath. Myself personally, I think that cocoa fiber is probably the best substrate you could use for a Dumerils boa, but you could also use cypress mulch, even aspen, although I'm not the biggest fan of aspen when it comes to like boas and pythons, but you could use that as well. As far as heating goes, and this is another thing that I love about Dumerils boas, and that is they don't need it very hot. They like a kind of cooler temperature, the ambient temperature range anywhere between like 75 to 80 degrees, and then their hot spot about 85 degrees. So that's another difference between them and something like, say, a red-tailed boa or a BI boa, is that they need like very hot spots. Dumerils boas do not. They like it a little bit cooler. And these snakes are really hardy, so as long as you have the temperature around those ranges, you're going to be fine, and these guys are going to thrive for you. Because these are ground boas, the way you're going to want to heat up their hotspot and heat up their enclosure, I would recommend either like a heat pad or heat tape, because they're going to spend most of their time on the bottom of their enclosure, and so you want to give them something to get them that belly heat. That's what I use. I use a heat pad for Legolas here with a thermostat, of course, because you want to make sure you're regulating that temperature and make sure that you don't burn your snake's belly. Another thing that's just amazing about Dumerils boas is that you don't need to worry about humidity as much. Their humidity needs to stay around the 40 to 60% range. That range can come as a shock to a lot of people, because a lot of the times when people think of Madagascar, they think of, well, besides the animated movie, hi there, they think of rainforests and they think of the tropics. And that is true for the northern part of Madagascar. But when you get into the southern part, especially the southwestern part of Madagascar, where there's a lot of Dumerils boas, it tends to be a little bit more dry. And so that's another amazing thing about them, is having a boa and not having to worry about humidity. My Guyana red-tailed boa that I just recently got, I have to keep that humidity around 70 to 80%. And I'm spraying that cage twice a day, whereas the Dumerils boa, I don't even have to spray the enclosure every day. It's more like every other day, and that's really helpful and really saves me a lot of time. You always want to make sure you're keeping a fresh bowl of water inside of your Dumerils boa's enclosure. I've noticed that Legolas tends to like to soak, and I'll catch him in his water dish quite frequently soaking, especially before sheds. He'll kind of soak and help him get that shed off. But I mean, that's just like a given, right? Just like, give your animals fresh water. Unless you're dealing with like a tarantula or something, but even then, give your tarantula fresh water. As far as Dumerils boa's diet, I don't think I really have to get into too much detail about it. It's pretty much the same as almost any other snake, and that's rodents. You probably could give them chicks. That's one of the negatives about any snake, is that you're gonna have to feed it rodents. Frozen thawed, preferably, that's what I give Legolas. These snakes have an insane food drive, and so that is one thing that you do kind of have to watch out for, because these snakes will hardly ever pass up a meal, and when they are hungry and when they think you're about to feed them, what are you doing? You're just exploring, huh? I guess I could let you explore a little bit. When they're really hungry and you open up that cage, they're gonna be ready and they're gonna be coming out looking for food. So just be aware of that. But it's honestly a good thing to have your snake have a high food drive, because then you're not stressing out about them not eating and wondering if your snake's starving itself to death. You know that these guys are going to be eating. As far as handling goes, surprisingly enough, Dumerils Boas are actually great to handle, and that's surprising because these snakes are considered to be ground boas, but as you can tell, they grip onto you fairly well. And compared to other snakes that spend most of their life on the ground, like say a blood python, which literally is just dead weight in your arms every time you hold it, you really have to support its whole body. Dumerils Boas are fairly adept at, you know, wrapping around you and holding on. So these snakes are really awesome to kind of hold, and they're really slow. They're not fast moving like a lot of colubrids are, but they're also not just kind of statues like blood pythons or some ball pythons are. These guys like to explore, and they can hold on to you, and they basically support their own weight. So they're just awesome to hold, and you can hand these snakes off to other people and kids and would have no problems with them being able to interact and hold your Dumerils Boa. And I say that you can hand them off to children specifically because these snakes in general have amazing personalities, and they are very, very, very reluctant to bite. It's really hard to find a Dumerils Boa that's angry. These snakes look angry all the time. They have like these mad looking faces, but they really aren't. And if you do have a snake that's skittish, 9 times out of 10, it's just gonna try to slither away from you and flee instead of fight. I can move my hands all around Legolas's face, and he's perfectly fine. And I really honestly don't think I take him out as much as I probably should. And he still is just super calm and super tame. I trust this snake as much as any other snake that I have in my collection. And that's one of the reasons why these snakes are just so amazing, and why I don't understand why they're so underrated, because something like a red-tailed boa, they're known to be a little bit more nippy, whereas Dumerils Boas are just known to be just super sweet and super reluctant to bite, and just a joy to interact with. As far as the cost and availability of Dumerils Boas are fairly rare in the pet trade. And I wouldn't say rare, I guess you're not gonna see them at common places. You're not gonna see them at pet shops. Some expos may not even have them, some may have them. They're a lot more common than their close relative, the Madagascar ground boa, which is super rare to find in the pet trade. But these guys are not common. If you go online, I'm sure you'll be able to find some Dumerils Boas, and every Dumerils Boa you find is going to be captive bred. You're probably looking at spending about $150 to $400 depending on what breeders and where you go to get a Dumerils Boa. The enclosure, the setup is gonna be the bulk of your cost, but even that, I mean, it's not something like a Burmese python where you're spending an arm and a leg to take care of it when it's full grown. There's a lot of trends that happen in the reptile world, and so some animals become super popular and then their popularity decreases and vice versa. And that's what kind of happened with Dumerils Boas. They were really popular a few years back, and then people kind of lost interest in them. And now slowly they're starting to gain that popularity again because of, you know, videos like this one and other ones like Wicked's Wicked Reptiles and other YouTube channels like that who are shining a light on these beautiful, beautiful snakes. And they deserve to get a lot of recognition because I'm not gonna lie to you guys, Dumerils Boas, in my opinion, are the best pet boa species. Just their ease of care and hardiness really gives them the edge over any other boa species. I mean, including red-tailed boas and BI boas, which you see all the time in the pet trade. I think Dumerils Boas take the cake got the perfect size for handling, not too big, not too small. Their temperament, they have a very docile temperament. Their heating and humidity requirements are fairly easy to figure out. If you are able to find a Dumerils Boa, and if you have the enclosure for it and do your research, I say get a Dumerils Boa because they're amazing. They're wonderful snakes, and you honestly will not regret it. So that is it for today's video, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I was helpful and gave you guys some solid information about Dumerils Boas. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me that Dumerils Boas are the best species of boa that you could possibly own? Do you guys agree with the way that I take care of Dumerils Boas? Give me your opinions, give me your thoughts, and give me your experiences with Dumerils Boas down in the comments. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and please, please, please share this video. Until next time, everybody, my name is Pierce LaValle. This is Legolas. We are in Pierce's Planet, and remember, it's all about the reps, baby. Peace. They're probably one of the most Dumerils Boas. So in this video, it's going to be a care guide all about Dumerils. Oh my god. Myself personally, I use Freedom Breeder Cocoa. Myself personally, I use the Freedom Breeder Cocoa Loco. Especially the southwestern part where many Dumerils